Good morning, people. Down here on the boat this morning, it's blowing in a little bit of a gale. We've got slightly overcast and a little sprinkly. It's starting to feel like a touch of a warning of fall coming in. That augurs something well, does it not? Anyway, we're on that conversation. I am so pleased that my efforts there in trying to communicate this complicated material seems to have been pretty well received. We'll stick with it a little bit and ride that pony while it's still got some gas in it. It's interesting. I mean, this is kind of on my mind too. Like, I introduced the use of the I Ching to the girlfriend here. I don't know, a few months ago. We were out to go sailing. She wasn't familiar with it. Was kind of interested in it, so we went through it in the formal traditional manner, with the willow wands and all that kind of stuff. And I don't remember exactly what the sign is. I guess I could look it up, but it doesn't really matter. And we went through it. She said, "Boy, I don't know if I get very much out of that, like many people do when they approach it the first time." And I said, "That's okay. I mean, all it's doing is describing for us in a descriptive, not prescriptive manner the kinds of things that are relevant to us at the moment and that we should be paying attention to." She's like, "Okay, that's fine." And, we're underway in the sailboat and we're out going across the bar here at Sandheads in the early morning on our way over to the islands. And we just happen to be kind of coming out through where the debris field is. There typically a lot of logs and stuff get washed out of the river, especially in the late summer. And we just happen to go sailing right by a log there with 5 seagulls and 1 cormorant on it. And I'm like, "Hey, look, there's our hexagram again." And she's like, "What?" See, and I'm saying, "No, see the hexagram right there of the there's 4 seagulls, a black cormorant, and another seagull. It's exactly the symbol that you generated this morning with the I Ching." She's like, "What? Really?" "Yeah, sure. It's like you've got 4 light lines, a dark line, and another light line. That's exactly what you drew this morning. So, I mean, we should continue to pay attention to that." And she just kind of looked at that and it's like, "Well, that's weird." It's like, what do you think that means?" I was like, "I don't know. I just pay attention to it. We'll see what it means, see what it unfolds into." She's like, "Does this kind of thing happen all the time with that book?" And I say, "Well, it happens all the time with anything that you do if you open your eyes to something and pay attention." It's just that the Ching is a very powerful tool in teaching you to open your eyes and pay attention to things that you normally wouldn't. And it's pretty well yelling that message at us, loud and clear right now. So let's stay on top of it. But sure, I mean, for anybody that's put time and effort meaningfully into the I Ching, yeah, it's potent. And you do come across those kinds of things a lot. For me, the most difficult experience that comes from the I Ching is this: having the experience of getting, say, perhaps over a period of 3 days, exactly the same result, say 3 times in a row. I've certainly had that happen a couple of times in my life. That is, if you are an honest, rational person, something that you are forced to confront that will threaten your worldview. And you're like, why? Well, because any given result within the I Ching is a 128,000 kind of result. To get that over a period of 3 days identically, what is that? 128,000 times 128,000, 128,000 factorial or something? Kind of odds. it's not something that should ever happen in your lifetime. And for it to happen meaningfully and over a period of, say, perhaps 30 years of encountering this practice, happening not infrequently, it forces you to feel pretty challenged in, well, let's just say how reality is distributed. Okay. Um, and I know that there's the kind of prickly dudes out there who view themselves as, you know, these the vanguard of rationalism. The facts don't care about your opinion kind of sorts. That's if you go halfway into rationality. If you go all the way through rationality, you find yourself in possession of a solipsistic monad that's more insane than it would be if you'd never tried. But that's okay. I would respond to the facts don't care about your opinion crowd with the response that reality cares very little to honor the expectations that you may formulate from your exercise in cherry picking a set of facts that you assume describe how the world really works. It sure doesn't. And having your eyes wide open um, is more prone to creating um, doubt than surety. Absolutely. But the reason one has their eyes open isn't for confidence, but profundity and meaning and relating. That's the goal here. And that's why we pursue it. But to continue the conversation here about integrating the secular with the sacred, I think we're off to a good start. It's really important that we acknowledge, and much of this comes from Fraser of the Golden Bough, something that any of you who are interested, you probably should read. But anyway, an important distinction here of the difference between an individual who is seeking the sacred, quote unquote, and an individual who is practicing a religion. They are fundamentally different things. And while a practice with an intimate relationship to the sacred, I believe, can be fully integrated into a modern secular worldview, religion absolutely cannot. And the purposes are different, although the topic and the material that they seem to be interested in might appear on the surface to be similar. Okay, so let me describe really as best I can in a nutshell what the difference between an individual who has an experience of the sacred as opposed to an individual who practices a religion. Okay, let's say that you have some bearded dude who wanders around out in the desert for 30 years. See how, once again, almost always in the mythology, somebody has to wander around in nature for a long time. I mean, Moses has to do this, the Bodhisattva has to do this, Jesus has to spend 30 days in the wilderness. Why is it that an experience of isolation in the nature is fundamental to experiencing the sacred? I digress. We've forgotten that. Anyway, but let's say we have the bearded dude who's out there wandering around in the desert. He climbs up the mountain and he sees the burning bush, and a voice speaks out of the burning bush, and he carves crap on a rock. Okay. I mean, I understand that's a really dumb story, and it sounds like it's something out of Marvel comic books, but hey, that's how it goes. Okay. If we even grant that that happened to the bearded dude, okay, for the bearded dude on the mountain, when he sees the burning bush, we can grant that for the dude, they're standing in front of the burning bush. His experience is, in fact, an authentic encounter with the sacred. Okay? Let's just go ahead and give it. But when he carves his crap on a rock and brings it down and hands it to other people who do not have a first-hand experience with the sacred, for them, his talking about his experience to them is religion. And people who are not particularly creative, courageous, or adventurous are attracted to the religious experience, because otherwise, to have some facsimile of the sacred, they would have to also spend a whole pile of time wandering around in the desert, climbing mountains, and hoping that they're going to come across a burning bush. What religion is outsourcing the responsibility of having the sacred experience to a third party, whereby then you can, typically for a fee, at least pretend to vicariously experience the sacred through their account. Now, I mean, obviously, the conspicuous opportunities for exploitation there that really exist aside, you have to ask, is that actually a healthy choice? Is it actually possible for an individual who, again, may have a hunger for a relationship with the sacred? Is it a healthy strategy to outsource this to some professional franchise that proclaims to have somewhere in its distant past some kind of connection to some kind of profundity, and then therefore they can somehow, again, like I say, mete that out to you in some, super sanitized, super safe, super low level of commitment manner? You can certainly understand that that might be attractive to some individuals, but only individuals whose hunger or compulsion to seek the sacred is pretty weak in the first place, because it wouldn't suffice for anybody who wanted the authentic, real thing, right? That is something to really contemplate. Now, this becomes incredibly important to make kind of conscious at this moment in history, because where we are in terms of our cultural zeitgeist, as I find best described by the postmodernist philosophers, and I would say probably of those, it would be Deleuze or Foucault, who probably do it most poignantly. I mean, the modern individual who is curious finds themselves at this moment in history dismayed, really, at once the great promise of human institutions, whether they were the sciences, whether they were government, whether they were, I don't know, any of these human endeavors, and how you discover fundamentally, and we experience daily, how hollow and insincere most of these hierarchies have actually shown themselves to be. Most of them have gotten to be so distant in what they are actually delivering from what it is that the task that they were ostensibly created to perform. They're so far from that. And again, one is confronted with having to face that, again, doctors don't really heal people, or government doesn't really rule, or, you name it, or you go down the line. There's tremendous cynicism that you cannot help but feel, especially if you are a hungry, curious, questing individual. And without a doubt, anyone who has looked at the history of religion and has seen how baloney was built on baloney on baloney on baloney on baloney for centuries, and the end result was not drawing people towards a relationship with the divine. It has been to alienate people. And now we are fundamentally almost fully alienated. Not only with the ability to relate to anything that might be described as divine, but each other too. The problem is, in our cynicism, it is very easy to throw the baby out with the bathwater. All right? And in our disgust and dismay at the dishonesty that is so conspicuous within so many of these institutions, we can make the error of assuming that the original task that perhaps supposedly mythologically lies at the root of why religions were formed, it's easy for us to assume that perhaps that was false too, but I'm here to say it's not. I'm saying that a innate instinct and a hunger for a personal relationship with quote-unquote the sacred is natural and human, right? Again, we have to use that uncomfortable terminology. It doesn't need to be uncomfortable. We need to co-opt it back from the for-profit crip spiders here. Again, for me, the sacred just simply means when the background, let's say source code, is conspicuously written for you, and you get a glimpse of the fundamental workings of things, when it's laid right out there in front of you, sometimes that happens. That's what I mean by the sacred. If you want to have a relationship with life, you want to have as much of that as possible. This is the source of gnosis. It's knowledge. Knowledge comes from information. The only way that you're going to get it and have that gnosis, that relationship with life, is to have these revelatory experiences where somehow you get these insights. They are first-person, first-hand, lived experiences. They are objective. They are not interpreted. They are not metaphorical. Religion has told us otherwise. I'm with Foucault. It's about power. But this doesn't mean that a healthy individual who is honest and possessing of enough courage to take the task on, fully aware of what the costs will be if you try, can't start opening the eyes and living that posture immediately. So yeah, I mean, I really do believe it is that simple. I think the path to this stuff is astonishingly short, but it's a big commitment and it's very deep. And it can be too much, and it can be overwhelming and terrifying and life-changing, something that a lot of people don't want, really quickly. But it's a very short path that is walked quite quickly if one makes the choice, and then the rest is consequences. I mean, it shouldn't surprise us that so often within religious practice, that outsourcing to external authority for your vicarious experience of the sacred, there's often such this big to-do of this long journey with all sorts of attainments and you get your blue belt and your black belt and your merit badge, and you attend this academy and that academy, and then these people tell you that you're holy, and you get ordained, and you get embraced into the orthodoxy, and you pad around in special robes that only certain people get to wear. And if you do this for like your entire effing life, then at some point somewhere along the line there's this promise way the hell out there that you're going to get some glimpse of something just like the primordial, like, bearded dudes did back in the desert, like, whatever. I mean, there's a reason that the path through religion is made so long and winding, because they want to string your butt out just as long as possible, always with the carrot leading you along in anticipation that the sacred is achievable, but just you're not there yet. That's not my message. I would say that any of you, if you just got up and went for a walk down the waterfront like I'm about to do, you're going to encounter the sacred just as commonly as you step in dog shit. It's fully mundane. It's a part of life, but it's probably the most important part of life. It's just that you have to have your eyes open to the possibility and be willing to receive it when it appears, and be willing to stop and listen and pay attention. If you do that, the rest of it takes care of itself. Anyway, I am about to go for a walk down this morning. It's almost mushroom picking season here, and I am going to go check it out because we got a little sprinkle last night. Eager for that. Anyway, some stuff to think about. I appreciate the conversation, and let's keep rolling along with this. Interested in hearing your feedback. Cheers, people.